Hello, everyone. Welcome back to part two on our Real Talk podcast, People Making a Difference in the Hamptons. We have had the pleasure on part one of talking with this fabulous woman who has been referred to as many times as Queen of the Docks, Bonnie Brady. I think a lot of you know her. She's been the executive director of the Long Island Commercial Fishing Association since its inception in 2001, representing commercial fishermen throughout Long Island. Before fighting for the rights of commercial fishermen, Bonnie worked as a journalist, was a Peace Corps volunteer, worked with Senator Bill Bradley in Washington, D.C. I don't know how she has done all of this. She was a member of the Montauk Fire Department for 20 years, volunteering as the department's first paramedic. Bonnie won the National Fisherman's Lifetime Achievement Award in 2020 for her years of service with the Long Island Commercial Fishing Association, the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council, as well as the Responsible Offshore Development Alliance. Queen of the Docks is an understatement. So we've been talking about a lot of things in part one. I hope you'll take a look at that. But Bonnie, welcome again.
Thank you.
And
so
I think we want to immediately get into what are the biggest challenges right now that are facing our local fishermen. What do the viewers need to know right now?
The biggest threats to commercial fishing, not only on Long Island, but frankly on the Atlantic seaboard right now, is offshore wind. That's the first one.
Offshore wind.
Offshore wind. Do you want me to just list five and then we'll go back?
Or sure.
Okay, whatever.
We have offshore wind. I would say fish farms on fishing grounds competing with commercial fishermen. The graying of the fleet. I think the three we can start with, and then I'll go from there. I think if that's okay. I mean,
sure.
Offshore wind. I was first involved with making myself aware of it in 2003 when Richie Kessler wanted to put 200 megawatts of 2 megawatt turbines, so 100 turbines in 3 miles of water just south of Jones Beach in the middle of our squid grounds. And that was the plan at the time. I think it was going to cost $500 million. I went to all the European studies to find out as much as I could, and most of it was bad. Luckily, that plan did not happen because Mark Harrington of Newsday finally did a story talking about the costs weren't $500 million, it was more like $2 billion. At the time, there was not a mandate requiring X amount of renewable energy, and as such, they had to care about the ratepayer costs. So they killed the project because it would have been too expensive for the ratepayers. That's when Kevin Law was there. Since then, unfortunately, the New York State has put in mandates for using only renewable energy sources for, I think it's like 25% by 2030. I think that may have changed actually to more than that, and to go to 100% renewable. And that sounds great. Unfortunately, offshore wind is not renewable. It is not green. It is, unfortunately now, if people are aware, the people that are involved building these are either foreign government-owned energy companies or private equity like BlackRock. That's an issue.
So what should we be doing instead?
And also talk about the danger that the off-wind project poses in the ocean. What is the real danger? Because so many of us, we think we're doing our best, fighting climate change.
Sounds nice.
And
it sounds great.
Is there a way that the two of us can come together?
I lived overseas for 2 years without running water or electricity. I get it. I understand, the need, but I also understand the need when you provide energy, electricity to people, it brings their standard of living up. That whole thing with the third world countries and, their desire to be able to have electricity, because then you have refrigeration, you have things for, electricity makes everything better.
Yeah.
What should we do instead? I can only say we shouldn't turn the ocean into an industrialized parking lot where you pave it with tens of thousands of miles of electric cabling of 340,000 volts, 24-inch cables crisscrossing the ocean floor in every direction, and then pile drive giant turbines, giant steel that's made with coal in order to get to the pressure that they build it with, pile drive that into the ocean floor, creating not only sound issues for all large whales, like the right whale, anything, because they're low frequency hearing, but
Dolphins.
fish, dolphins, everything, right.
So that's what would happen, although we don't,
You wouldn't
we're
see
not
it,
told
right,
that
right, because, right,
now, but
right, you
that
see a
would-
pretty picture of a
right,
windmill
that's
and,
what
oh,
it'll
it's,
evolve
right,
into,
right.
is what you're saying,
The
right?
reality is once you start to read, you pick
Yeah.
up a construction and operation plan for the turbines. In the documents, BOEM states that the effects of wind turbines on climate change is negligible. If you go to each individual project and look at the emissions that it takes for these ships that are coming mostly from Denmark to survey our ocean floor using sub-bottom profiling that doesn't, it's not like an air gun in that it goes several miles under the ground, but they use individual or double air guns called boomers and sparkers that literally send sound waves down maybe 800 feet into the ground at low frequency sound that has been known to create either temporary or permanent deafness for marine mammals, which you can read about level A and level B harassment. We have had the slight whale issue, which people will be like, oh no, it's not that, misinformation. 85 large whales between December 1st of 2022 and December 31st of 2023 washed up, stranded, dead or near dead on the Atlantic coast from Maine to Florida last in 13 months. Not one entanglement, not one. They
So
can't.
you explain it as largely because.
Well,
of-
we don't know what it's about, but that's why we asked for a federal investigation.
I
When
see.
whales started piling up like cordwood in beaches in New
Right.
Jersey, we said, okay, we know the government gives out these incidental harassment authorizations. You can harass so many animals. Harassment, level B harassment, includes temporary deafness. I think that's a little bit more severe than just harassing an animal. Level A, which they give for some species of large whale, smaller whales, dolphins, porpoises, is permanent deafness for an animal that requires sound in order to exist and live. So that's one issue that we try to say, hey, let's stop everything. Let's open up everything.
To
Let's
see if
look.
there is this strong connection,
Right, or see if
relationship.
there's any, because they're
Yeah.
not doing, they haven't been doing the ears on necropsy
Is
work.
Stony Brook involved in some of the research here?
Stony Brook is involved with
Mentioned
Ørsted. They got
in-
$5.3 million from Ørsted to put in passive acoustic monitors, which basically will, with a tagging system to try to tag various fish and then put the monitors in, so when the fish passes by, or actually it may not be a passive acoustic monitor, but it somehow, the tag sounds out to the monitor so they can see the various migrations of fish, because they're looking into whether or not electric cables that also have EMF in them are affecting fish migrations.
Is that helpful?
Um,
Is that good research, do you think?
If that
what would you
information were
recommend?
made completely public, I would say that might have value, but if you only tag 100 fish out of a spawning stock biomass of several million, you might have too small of a study to actually prove anything, either in the negative or the positive.
So are the fishermen seeing a depletion of fish out there due to the offshore
Well,
wind
let me be
farms?
Let me be clear
Just so
first,
the
if we
viewer is
have
clear.
only the Block Island Wind Farm, which is off of Rhode Island, is the only active wind farm right now. They've been doing surveying work since 2015. In fact, they did some survey work and they didn't even request an incidental harassment authorization, they just went and did it. The unusual mortality event for whales, right whale began in 2017, minke began in 2017, and humpback began in 2016. As far as in what they need to get, the problem is, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought here. Your question was specifically as to,
Have the fishermen
Fishermen,
noticed a depletion
from
in
survey work.
in their
right,
catches?
Right.
And is that affecting them economically?
Well, the survey, which uses low frequency sound and medium frequency sound, anecdotally, meaning that just from fishermen talking, they've been to an area, they go, they have a great day of catch, they're bringing it into shore as the survey boat's going out to survey that same area where they catch fish, and the fishermen have gone back out 12 hours later and suddenly the fish are gone. Anecdotally, we have been told that once the survey boat shows up, you're not going to, if it's a fish that moves, the fish will not be there. They get out of the area. They don't like the sound. But for species like scallops that really don't swim very far, there's been a real concern, especially off of New Jersey, that areas that have been surveyed intensely by several different groups, but they had up to At one point, I think they had up to 14 or 15 survey boats in the mid-Atlantic over this past summer. And that a lot of the scallops that were being put up in those areas were what they refer to as clappers, and that, you know, the muscle is totally intact, but when they go to open it, there's nothing in there. It's just completely done. And whether or not the sound is affecting their ability to feed or tiring them out to the point where they become compromised. The bottom line is that this entire process is in ready, shoot, aim mode. Fisheries are always required to be precautionary, the precautionary principle, do no harm. This is just coming at us in such a rapid function. Pile driving is a real issue. Pile driving will deafen whales. It will kill fish if you're in the area. It makes fish avoid the certain areas.
And as you say, there's powerful economic interests behind this.
Right.
We were talking
For
about
example, Ørsted used to be called Danish Oil and Natural Gas. It's 51% owned by the government of Denmark. Statoil, which is now called Equinor, is 67% owned by the Norwegian government. Ørsted always says, oh no, I'm sorry?
Blackstone, you said?
Oh, Blackstone is now taken over as Eversource's partner. They used to have 13% of, I think, shares of Eversource as part of Eversource is the electric company, utility company from Connecticut. And they now took over the entire thing. I think it was Global Partners, Global Limited Partners, or I forget, and they were purchased by BlackRock. So now BlackRock is involved.
Right.
It's been BlackRock, it's been Blackstone. Blackstone was the initial group that ponied up most of the funding and used the Martha's Vineyard Energy Cooperative to push and put in the application for what became Vineyard Wind. Then as soon as they were chosen for that, they flipped it to Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, which are all mostly former Dong employees, which is now called Ørsted.
So where are we now in the conversation in terms of the good versus the harm?
There is over 2 million acres offshore that have been leased for wind farms. I wish I had graphics to be able to show you.
And are the studies still going on?
The studies in some cases are just beginning, or a lot of the studies are being done in partnerships with the wind companies, with various universities.
2 million acres?
2 million, over 2 million acres. The Gulf of Maine, from the Gulf of Maine all the way down to North Carolina. And those areas just conveniently happen to be some of the most predominantly offshore fished areas by commercial fishermen. Whether you're a longliner, whether you're a trawler, whether you're a scalloper, whether you're a clam dredger, those are areas where a majority of commercial fishermen work in the winter or the summer, depending upon the year, depending upon where the stocks of fish are. That's part of the reason why I was a founding board member for the Responsible Offshore Development Alliance, RODA, is because these projects started coming so rapidly fast that we needed to have a group together that could have the ability to have our own experts to be able to write those letters when we have an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement, to put everything on the record regarding NEPA. But
And I was
NEPA,
asking, perhaps even lawsuits begin.
right, well, the National, Environmental Policy Act is NEPA, and you're supposed to avoid, minimize, and mitigate.
Right.
They kind of forgot the avoid part, and so BOEM told us, which is Department of Interior, oh, no, we're just doing a call area, and then when they offered a lease, no, we can still make it smaller later, don't worry, but once the developer gets the lease, they bring all of these ships doing sub-bottom profiling, doing geophysical and geotechnical. The geophysical is the sub-bottom profiling, the geotechnical is vibracoring and doing soil samples and all sorts like that. They spend millions of dollars to do this work. The idea that somehow when they provide their construction operation plan that any real removal of fishing grounds is going to happen is ridiculous. And that's why we're suing.
So it sounds like there isn't much of a conversation going on right now.
No.
Between, say, the powers that be and the fishermen.
Well, there's a conversation, but nothing that we say, it's kind of like Charlie Brown, talking to the teacher, wah, 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 wah. We've written comment letter after comment letter. It's the reason why our association is one of the plaintiffs in the first record of decision. We are suing the federal government because they ignored, I think it's on 30 different counts of policy that they should have done or things that they were supposed to do that they did not.
Well, and the other issue is educating the public.
Right. And
That's
look, I don't
really the
blame
big issue.
anyone that thinks, in your question, well, what do we do instead? Well, I'm not an electrical engineer, but I have my own thoughts. I mean, first of all, use less, but that doesn't seem to be the issue because,
And fish farms aren't the answer.
no.
Well,
Wanna-
let's get
wanna
into
get into
that?
that right now.
Little
Tell-
bit, yeah.
Right.
Tell us about
Well,
the fish that people are buying, how healthy or unhealthy they
Yeah,
are
right,
as
yeah,
opposed to
yeah.
fresh
right,
catches.
right. Wild caught seafood is absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, the best. You don't have to, all you have to do is look to the fish farms in Europe or the fish farms in British Columbia, and you look at all the diseases they have when they're penned in and having to get antibiotics or, if there's escapement of genetically modified fish. These are huge issues. I mean, they closed down a variety of salmon farms, I believe, on the West Coast because of this. And I mean,
Wow.
the amount of detritus under these. What's the problem for us is commercial wild caught fishermen. So in addition to the areas that are blocked off for offshore wind, where we cannot work with mobile tending bottom gear, and also our marine radar won't work, the National Academy of Sciences came out with something in 2022 that said, no, if there's false targets and ghost targets, when you're outside of a windmill, you can see the turbines, but they reflect because they're metal, they're a structure. But so we can't go into those areas. And now additionally, where we can't go there, they're now trying to put fish farms to further limit us as to
Yeah.
where we're going. And not only that,
Unhealthy.
they're trying to grow these fish. I mean, for example, Manna Fish Farm, which has been trying for years to get in off of Southampton, they totally said things that were completely false. And when you look at their application versus what they're saying, oh, we're only going to do striped bass, and every third we're going to donate. Every third time we have these fish, we're going to donate them to community. And then you realize they want to do like 20 different species of fish. They want to do everything. They talked about tuna, they talked about scallops. What happens if you bring those, first of all, frankenfish into the scenario, and you're going to be competing with who? You're going to be competing with us. There's a great group called Don't Cage Our Oceans, and we have been actively supporting, as in being behind them 100%, because this is, like I've said before, tilapia, that's basically a science project. You have to
Right.
remember, when tilapia first started in this country with the Sustainable Fisheries Act that I talked about in the last thing, 96, I think, or maybe 2000, 96 or 98, it was like a $55 million industry, tilapia imports into the US. 2 or 3 years ago, $5 billion industry.
And a lot of the restaurants serve the tilapia. What about
Yeah.
the fish farms that claim that they are organic?
Yeah.
What does
So
that
difference-
really
what does that
even
mean?
mean?
I
Does
don't-
it mean anything?
There's no standardization of the word organic. You can look at various like California growers, et cetera, and what they had to go through in order there's nothing there. As far as in, if you have a species and you are penning them, I mean, they talked about putting in these metal cages with the fish, and they have a feeder in the center, and they bring the cages up mechanically up to the top, they feed the fish, and then they bring them back down.
Oh, boy.
Has no one told them about Sandy? I just have this vision of these animals. I mean, certain fish can't be grown in certain temperatures. There's going to be
Right.
predatory
Yeah, no, it's-
impacts to it. You have to, in some cases, give some sort of antibiotic to certain species of fish.
It's messed up.
No,
It's
well,
so
not only that,
obvious.
also
Yeah.
the nitrates, the detritus from having a fish farm. What is that going to do? Why would you want to do that? It's about making dollars. They'll be like, oh, well, fish, they're not sustainable. In the US, if you catch a fish commercially, it is sustainable by virtue of the Magnuson-Stevens Act, period.
You mentioned, okay, so what are some of the politicians that you're appealing to be allies?
I
Should we
mean,
throw up RFK
our,
Jr.,
well,
known as environmentalist?
I mean, his brother was
Hudson
very
Jr.
instrumental in a lot of environmental issues regarding fishermen and being supported back. I was talking about Barney Frank. Barney Frank too was amazing for the
Senator
fishing
of
industry.
Massachusetts,
Um,
Congressman.
RFK, I had not known of him during his NRDC days.
Okay.
But obviously we're lawsuits with NRDC versus fishing interests, so there's that separate issue. But I did have the opportunity to meet him this past year, and I want to establish a dialogue if he happens to be in the New York area, because people need to understand the value and the guarantee when you buy an American caught, or in this case, a New York caught fish that's landed in New York. Here's all the regulations. Here's all the things that prove sustainability. There are no regulations, virtually zero, on fish that are being imported into this country. And even some of the supposed regulatory bodies, like for shrimp, yeah, it turns out that, they're blowing up mangroves in Thailand to do
But
it.
this is why the
Yeah.
public is so confused.
Right,
Absolutely.
because they've been being
It's-
bombarded
They're
as to,
just so confused.
and they want to know how to do the right thing, but they don't have that
The
information.
information.
Which makes the fact that, like, we live in a fishing community, we've got the boats here. People can come, as far as in, they can see the fish that are being packed out. There is this tightness in this community that I wasn't born into fishing at all, I'm a kid from New Jersey that, spent the formative years in South Orange and West Orange. But to see and to marry a fisherman and then find out, my husband has been fishing since he was 15 years old. And those that he started out Great South Bay as a clammer. And to see, like, Long Island, I refer to as a patchwork of fishing communities.
Was he born and raised in
He-
Montauk?
No, in Babylon,
Okay.
Bayshore.
Do you see a push out here in particular for more fish farming? Is there a push right now?
There's a push in Southampton which will affect fishermen from Long Island. Anytime you add new imports, in essence, into the market, when you don't have processing, when you don't have other areas, you are decreasing the price of the fish for sale. And if they can clearly undercut the fish, they're not taking it, they're just growing it. It's like I said, it's a science project. They're growing it, they're throwing it out there. You don't know under what conditions that they're in. I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen, like, horror pictures of, like, some of these fish farms where it's literally like a dead zone underneath the area, because there's just all of this stuff, whether there's enough current or not. It should not be necessary. Instead, you want to know that you're adhering to the gold standard. That's what American fish is. We are constantly, the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, the New England Fishery Management Council. We have specific tenets, specific laws that we must adhere to. Changes every time, times of year, months, type of gear, you name it. We're doing everything, and every time they ask for a change, we are finding the ways to get it done and still provide food. So why
You're still
would
surviving. So, and I'm trying to leave us with some sort of optimistic note. Your husband is optimistic. I mean, we that's Billy Joel song, right? The Bayman.
right. And Billy
heard
Joel
about-
has been, he's been a huge supporter of the
Right.
Bayman for years and years,
Right.
and even for the Long Island Commercial Fishing Association, been very supportive, and we appreciate that a lot.
Right.
People kind of need to get to know their fishermen. They would need to know where their food
Well,
comes from.
my
That was-
next question was, what can the public do right now? What are just a few things for the
Well-
viewers watching?
Well, that's the thing, is when COVID happened, didn't we learn it's important where your where your food comes from, and national food security? And that's possibly being lost because most people, if you live in an urban area, you don't have that immediate connection to this area to understand what you're buying, or is
The
this
mom and
sustainable?
pop stores, the old
Right,
stores
right. You
aren't
couldn't
there.
go right and see the people,
The
and
fish
right.
markets and
You
so
weren't
on,
you
yeah.
weren't following the chain of custody, as it were, and
Right.
that's something that
can
really,
still do
if
here.
the feds, NOAA, they could create look for the union label, look for the U.S. fish tag to be able to say this is bought in the U.S. This has extra value because we put the sustainability standards higher than anyone else.
And it tastes
Crickets.
better.
Oh,
It's healthier.
Of course, it's fresh and it's
Exactly.
healthier. Of
Right.
But
course.
at least for right now, people
Right.
here can, support the local fishermen
Right.
by just buying what is caught right here.
Right, and
period.
having those that are in the restaurant industry, because when we were talking about
Yes.
before, that table tent awareness to consumers was only as good as your manager that made sure the sign stayed on
Exactly
and
right.
educated the staff.
That's
And it
right.
really is important, and you'll find more value, I think, because the price for local fish is going to be less expensive than you're probably buying from the fish buyer for the other fish that they truck out on a truck
Absolutely.
back to you.
There was one other thing, I know we're getting close to
Right.
the time, but you mentioned another really big challenge, the graying of the fleet. Can you
Right.
tell us real quickly, what does that mean?
The graying of the fleet means the majority of fishermen that are in this business right now are aging. They're in the 45, 50,
Got it.
65-year-old bracket.
Okay.
And there haven't been enough entrants into the market.
That was,
I mean, into the business. It's expensive to buy permits. There's no kind of apprenticeship. There's no
Do you
type
have children?
I do. I have two girls. One of them, my one daughter,
What
she
might
worked.
go into this
Well,
work?
my one daughter, she's down in Georgia right now, and
Okay.
she's whatchamacallit, but she worked on the deck during the summertime, you know,
There
so
you
she was good. My other daughter's in California, so it's not looking like
Right.
it, but no matter who you are, there are sons that are getting into this. You want to be able to have, it should be involved in every trade school. We should have a version of Fishadelphia, which teaches kids in Philadelphia, inner city kids, how to become fish buyers, how to learn the whole process of the business. We should be teaching people how to create their own businesses with local fish. And being able to, the more markets we have, the better the chance of prices increasing, the more demand for that fish. It's good for everyone.
we could do something with the high school.
That's what
with
I
the
would
high
love
schools
to do.
locally.
I would love to
Nutrition,
do that.
nutrition.
Absolutely.
And BOCES, you know, they do a marine diesel, I think, program, but that's about it.
I think we've run out of time.
know,
What,
Yes.
I have to ask you
Okay, ask
another
another one.
question. You
Okay.
are doing amazing work, you're all over the place, and very deliberately so. What practices do you, Brady, do to keep you grounded and energized? Really?
You know, I was running a lot and biking a lot, but I had a groin pull for the last 2 years, so I'm hoping to get back into it. You know, I have to be gingerly with that. Other than that, I just wake up every day and realize I'm doing the right thing for all of these
Yeah,
people, for my
yeah.
community, and that
That's a
really
great
matters.
feeling.
So you're living a life of purpose,
I'm trying.
filled with passion.
Yes.
And eating good, healthy fish,
And
local
oh,
fish.
I get all kinds of great fish. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Bless you.
Thank you so
bless
very
you for
much,
everything that
really.
you do.
Very important.
Our guest, Bonnie Brady.
Thank you,
If you have
Bonnie.
any
Thank you.
questions, you can get in touch with her directly. She can fill you in with everything that you need to know. Till next time, keep it real, folks.